Hello vinyl community, hope you're all doing well out there. Today I'm gonna talk about the Beatles, the best band on the planet ever. You know, I'm a really big Beatle nut, you know. When I was like 14 or 15 years, I got really hooked onto the Beatles. You know, my parents, they had the blue and the red double LP, and I like played it till death. You know, I played it so many times that even my mom came up and said, like asked me to put on something else. And I especially liked the blue. I think it was the blue album that was the later era Beatles. And the psychedelic stuff, when they really started to do really good songs, in my opinion. And we also had this VHS documentary called Beatles Complete, spelled like beat, complete. And it was a fantastic documentary of their career. I fell in love with their personalities and the band and the story and everything that they did. So I was totally hooked, and I'm still to this day a real Beatle nut. But, I mean, I don't really listen to it that often these days. You know, I've heard them so many times and I know all the songs, and so I don't put it off that often. However, I do have them in my collection, and it feels really good to have them, so I can pull them out if I want to and play something. You know, there are tons of VC channels talking about the Beatles, but most of them actually talk about, you know, reissues or box sets or new remixes or remasters or whatever. And in this video I just want to share how I collect the Beatles. I want to go as close to the source as possible. I want to have the old pressings as they sounded when they came out, because I think that's the way you should experience Beatles. Anyway, not to make this video too long, I have shortened it to the years 66 to 68, or the psychedelic years, because that is the era that I think they did the best music. And I of course love what they did after as well, and so on. I'm gonna show you what I have and tell you what I think about them as well. Before we start, I want to go through some important rules when it comes to collecting Beatles. And these are really important stuff that you have to follow. And the first rule is stay away from everything that Capitol Records released. You should only go for the Parlophone releases in the UK. Capitol Records, up until Sgt. Pepper, they totally changed every track listing of every album. They took off songs from albums. They put together some weird compilations, and like Yesterday and Today, you know, the Butcher cover. To me, that is just crap. You don't need to have any of those. If you're from the US, you're probably gonna disagree with me and think that Capitol Records did some fantastic releases of Beatles. But that's not how you should listen to Beatles. Even if you grew up with listening to them that way. You can't listen to Revolver without having I'm Only Sleeping on it. It's impossible. From Sgt. Pepper and onwards, they released the records with the same track listing as in the UK. So the later era Beatles you can buy from Capitol Records if you want. But my first rule is get the UK presses on Parlophone. These are the ones to collect, in my opinion. Rule number 2. Find the records in mono. Beatles should be listened to in mono up until Sgt. Pepper. Magical Mystery Tour is not an album, it's an EP, and I prefer that in mono as well. White Album, personally I prefer the stereo version better, so you don't need to track down the expensive mono on that one. But from Sgt. Pepper and backwards, get the albums in mono. They are so much better, and the stereo mixes are often really not that good. Especially on Sgt. Pepper, where the mix is totally catastrophe. You should never listen to Sgt. Pepper in stereo. Rule number 3. Stay away from all those compilations with Beatles songs. Go with the LPs and the singles. And the singles are really important Beatles released singles as a proper release, you know. They didn't just take 2 songs from the album and put out as a single. They released non-album tracks, singles, and the singles are often the best songs they did. And the LPs had other tracks, so it's a different story. A few tracks, of course, came out from LPs as singles a little bit later on, but for the most part, the singles are non-album tracks. Get the singles. They are inexpensive to find originals, and they are really, really cool to have.
Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream.
Okay, I said we're gonna do 1966 to 68, but I want to go a little earlier and start with Rubber Soul, that came out in December 1965, late 65. And in my opinion, this is their first real masterpiece of an album. This is the first one where they didn't include some unnecessary rock and roll covers like Roll Over Beethoven and stuff like that. These are just a proper Beatles album that is a transitional album when they were starting to open the door to psychedelic music. I mean, John and George had tried LSD early in 65, and some of their songwriting were starting to get influenced by acid and the psychedelic experience. And this is my UK mono pressing, yellow black Parlophone label. This is how you should get it in mono. So this is the first album where you could really hear some of the influences from LSD. And it's especially the John Lennon songs here, Nowhere Man or In My Life, and also like the dreamy nature of Girl or so. So they were like opening the door to psychedelia. This isn't a psych record, but it has some early signs of psych.
The sun is working for the daily man. It's a steady job, but he wants to be.
So by 1966, both John, George and Ringo were heavily into taking acid, and that has totally changed how they wanted to write music and record music. Paul was a little late on that, so he wasn't experienced at that point. And you can really hear the difference in 1966 between the other Beatles and Paul. But the first release they did in 66 was the Paperback Writer Rain single. This is the first proper psychedelic recording they did, with John Lennon's Rain on the B-side. That is probably one of my top 3 Beatles recordings and songs ever. And it's of course the John Lennon track. He was the mastermind in Beatles, in my opinion. He was the true genius in that band. But on this recording they really did a true psychedelic recording. They recorded it in different speed and speed it down to get really heavy sound. And then they pitched up to get the vocals to sound more unnaturally. And I should also say that Ringo's drumming on this Rain is from another planet. He was also into LSD, but he didn't write songs. But he played psychedelic drums for the first time here. And I think Ringo himself has said that he never played better than he played on Rain. But to me, this was the starting point for Ringo to become this really, really amazing drummer. He did a lot of absolutely fantastic drumming in 66, 67, 68 and 69. I mean, throughout their career from here on, he did some fantastic drum. Never made it too complicated, but he made it exactly what the song needed. He's like a hook drummer. He could come up with like drum hooks that really took the songs to another level. But I can't say enough of how great Ringo's drumming is on Rain. It's mind-blowing good. And this is the UK press in a standard Parlophone company sleeve, the way you should have Rain. I mean, Paperback Writer is a great song as well. totally heavy, totally great bass playing. Paul is killing it on that one, and amazing harmony vocals on Paperback right there. So fantastic single, both sides are amazing, but Rain is my pick on this one.
When the sun shines, they slip into the shade. When the sun shines, sit there, lemonade. When the sun shines, when the sun shines,
So, in August '66, they released their masterpiece Revolver. This fantastic cover art by Klaus Voormann, their friend from Hamburg. And this is a UK original mono pressing on the yellow-black Parlophone labels. And I mean, Revolver, if Rubber Soul were the Pot album, Revolver was their LSD album. They did some amazing psychedelic music here. But still at this point, Paul hadn't tried LSD yet, so it was mostly John who was really hooked on LSD and George. So they were starting to do real psychedelic music here. I mean, Paul's songs aren't that psychedelic, I would say. He did some amazing songs here, like my favorite, Here, There and Everywhere. It's a fantastic song by Paul. But when it comes to the Beatles, it's always about John Lennon to me. And his side of the Beatles is the side that I really love. Paul had his moments, but John is the man. And on this album, we have Tomorrow Never Knows, the greatest psychedelic recording ever put down to tape.
turn off your mind, relax and float downstream. It is not dying. It is not dying. Lay down.
That recording was actually the first song they recorded to this album, really early in '66. When they came back from a quite long vacation, John showed them this song, and it was just one chord, and it was strange lyrics about an LSD trip, turn off your mind, relax and float downstream. Timothy Leary inspired psychedelic lyrics. And the others were like, okay, John, are we doing this now? But everyone like joined into this, and they produced some amazing psychedelic music. And other highlights on this album to me is I'm Only Sleeping with the backwards guitar. That is another absolutely amazing John Lennon track.
When I wake up early in the morning, lift my head, I'm still yawning. When I'm in the middle of a dream, stay in bed, float upstream. Please don't wake me, no.
And on the Capitol release, they took it off. And they also took out a couple of other tracks. I think they took out Dr. Robert and some other track. The great side of this LP is amazing. Tomorrow Never Knows, She Said, She Said, She Said, I'm Only Sleeping, Eleanor Rigby. So many great tracks here. And also this is I think it's the last album where they worked really well as a band. Where, you know, if John come up with a song, everyone else were like pitching in as a band, figure out their parts, and they played really good together. They have been, you know, playing live for so long, so they were like a super tight band. Later on they did great music and helped each other to create fantastic music, but this was like a really good band effort. And here you can see the Fab Four on the back. I never have multiple copies of an album, But I actually have it on Revolver. I have the first pressing has the Matrix ending number 1 on both sides. That the first Withdrawn remix of Tomorrow Never Knows. Not in the best condition though, but you know, Parlophone did some fantastic pressing, so even if you have a quite beaten up copy, they still sounds really good. So you can find like a G plus or a VG copy, it still is gonna sound good with these UK pressings. However, this Withdrawn mix of Tomorrow Never Knows, I mean, it isn't much to write home about. To me, it's not necessary to have this copy. I just found it for cheap. You know, when I go to a record fair, sometimes I pull out every Revolver I see and see if that's the right Matrix number. Sometimes it is, and and those pressings go for quite a bit of money. But I found it cheap, so I grabbed it. But the mix is just a little different in the fade out. I could hear some extra piano or something that I couldn't hear on the other mix. But so it's stick to the original mono copy of Revolver.
You say yes, I say no. You say
After Revolver, they tried to get back on the road to tour a bit, and it's all those disastrous year with all those Malaysian gig and Shea Stadium, and Beatles were bigger than Jesus and everything, all the chaos in America. So they decided to stop touring and didn't go back on the road at all after this. But in early '67 they got back into the studio, and they wanted to focus more on the studio recording and see how far they could push it. And the first thing they released was Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane single. Probably the best double-side pop single ever released, in my opinion. And mainly because Strawberry Fields Forever, one of the best psychedelic recordings ever. If Tomorrow Never Knows was the best, this is the second best, or this is the best, or that is I don't know. I don't know. But it's an absolutely fantastic song. You've heard it 10,000 times, so I mean, it's nothing to be hung about. But it's one of those songs that are above all the other songs. They introduced the Mellotron here that became so popular with all the prog bands, and so you have heard these songs 10,000 times, but this one you can find really cheap, and it's the best pop single they ever released. Strawberry Fields Forever. Penny Lane is good, but it's not as good. Then of course Summer of Love, in June 1st, 1967, Sgt. Pepper came out. The most iconic LP ever released, in my opinion. And this is the UK mono pressing. Of course mono. This is important to find in mono. Here you can see the band and Paul with his knees up. All those freaks later on thought that he was like floating because he was dead, and on the back side turned his back towards the audience, and this was supposed to look like Paul's funeral. I don't know. Came with this insert, of course. The mono pressing looks like this on yellow black Parlophone. So Sgt. Pepper, you all know this. I can say a few things about it. It has some of the finest John Lennon tracks. A Day in the Life, the verses on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and a couple of other tracks.
he blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was.
But some of the songs are, yeah, you know, I'm not a big fan of When I'm 64, and I think it's a good album, but it's too much Paul on this album. Only 3 songs here are like 3 or 4 songs are John Lennon songs, and much of it is Paul. It was Paul's idea, and to do this Sgt. Pepper thing. It feels a little bit like Paul was trying to jump on the psychedelic wagon a year later. I mean, at this point he had tried LSD, but George and John and Ringo, they were like years before that were they into LSD. So, but it's still of course a really influential album. I mean, this and Velvet Underground's debut is probably the most influential albums ever put out. A little bit later in the summer they released All You Need Is Love with the B-side Baby You're a Rich Man. This is I think it's a Scandinavian pressing on Parlophone. To be honest, I don't think I need this single in my collection. I mean, it was really cool that they did the TV show live and this is the recording of it. But I mean, it's not that I put on All You Need Is Love. It came out in July '67. The next single they released was Hello Goodbye with the B-side Am the Walrus. And the B-side on this single is I'm the Walrus, the third masterpiece by John Lennon, psychedelic masterpiece by John Lennon. That song appeared on Magical Mystery Tour EP as well, but this was the first when it came out. I think Hello Goodbye is a great song as well by Paul, but as usual, the John Lennon side of things is always better. Cheap single, you can find it for like €5 or so, €10 in really good condition. And all those singles were of course pressed in mono, so you don't have to worry about a bad stereo mix when you find these singles. Anyway, the next release they did came out in December '67, was the EP Magical Mystery Tour. A double 7-inch EP that came with a booklet with pictures and stuff from the film. So it's a double EP, and this is how Magical Mystery Tour came out in my opinion. The LP version that came out in America is just a product of Capitol Records that wanted to sell more LPs. So they threw in the songs from this EP on the A side, and on the B side they just added up Strawberry Fields Forever and All You Need Is Love and Hello Goodbye and the singles from that year, basically. So it's like a compilation with one side with new tracks. So in my opinion, stay away from the Capitol Records and get this double 7-inch EP. And this is the UK mono. And I actually have the UK stereo here. I prefer the mono, but you know, this isn't that expensive, so you can find this for like maybe 20, 30 euro for a good copy of this. But this has, of course, the masterpiece I'm the Walrus, and The Fool on the Hill by Paul is fantastic. The title track is amazing, and a couple of other songs are really good as well. So this is, yeah, top class psych music in my opinion. And just look at this cover.
Lady Madonna, baby at your breast, wonders how you manage.
Yeah, moving on to '68, the year when things started to crack a little bit in the Beatles world. They first went to India, and something happened in India. I don't know exactly what it was, but when they came back, the relationship between John and Paul has changed quite a bit. And at this point they more or less wrote their own songs. And Paul, he has this really big ego, and he wanted it to sound a certain way, so he started to like go into the production and be more dominant in the studio, and the other guys didn't really like that at all. However, he wrote some amazing songs in '68, you know, the really big hits he wrote, and one of them is Lady Madonna. This came out in March '68, I think when they came back from India, maybe. I'm not really sure when they came back from India. Anyway, Lady Madonna, classic Beatles song, of course. This is the Swedish or Scandinavian Parlophone pressing with George Harrison's Inner Light on the B-side. In August '68, they released one of the biggest songs, Hey Jude. I don't put on Hey Jude, I mean, I've heard it 10,000 times, but still it's a fantastic song. And the B-side is John Lennon's Revolution, one of the all Revolution versions. When they released the White Album, it was another version on it. I prefer this single version. Those guitars are from another planet. They plugged their guitars right into the mixing console and cranked it up to get this fast guitar that you hadn't heard at this point. It's so freaking amazing, and people were like returning this single because there's something wrong with the B-side. When it started, it sounds like they had never heard a distortion like that before. That was like fantastic. So a great double-side single as well.
You want a revolution? Well, you know, we all want to change the world. You tell me that it's evolution. Well,
Now to the last LP they released in 1968. I think it was November 1968. They released one of their most interesting albums, the White Album, or the self-titled just The Beatles. This is a UK original mono pressing with all the features. It has John, it has Ringo, George and Paul. Came with a large poster with lyrics and I don't know, you know it. And of course with the unique stamp number. This is my number. Really, I'm really not too bothered with what number you have here. This is the mono pressing. Looks like this, with a dark green apple there. So these mono pressings are hard to find and quite rare and quite expensive to find. I think it's cool to have, but I think I prefer the stereo version. I think it's a better mix than this mono. I don't have a stereo pressing of this, I just have this mono, but I would like to get stereo pressing someday. Maybe I sell this mono. Anyway, so many good songs here, and as usual in my world, the greatest songs here are by John Lennon. Sexy Sadie, Happiness is a Warm Gun, I'm So Tired, Dear Prudence, the list goes on.
Sexy Sadie, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone. You made a fool of everyone. Sexy Sadie, oh, what have you done?
So many great songs, and George did some fantastic songs on this one as well, and so did Paul. But also he included some of their crap songs like Obladi Oblada and Honey Pie. And And to me, that really drags these LPs down when I'm 64 and Obladi Oblada and those silly tracks that, at least in my world, silly tracks. I think these LPs could have been so much better if they had put out some of those songs. He could have written them to other artists. I mean, he wrote some songs for Mary Hopkins and Badfinger and other bands. He could just like give those songs away to other artists and they could concentrate on doing amazing Beatles music. I mean, I talk a lot of crap about Paul here, but to me John Lennon is the man. But Paul and John had like this amazing connection, and Paul and John could like communicate through music, and Paul could understand what John meant when he said, I want it to be more dreamy. He couldn't really put to words what he wanted the music to sound like. Paul understood what he wanted, and when they collaborated on songs, it became fantastic. But when Paul didn't want to collaborate with John, the magic kind of disappeared. So later on, when he did some solo recordings, he tried to have Phil Spector as that counterpart, or Yoko Ono as that counterpart, and he never came up to the same magic as when he collaborated with Paul McCartney. So they had a special thing for sure. And even Ringo wrote some songs like Don't Pass Me By, and that is a crap song as well. But it's kind of charming. Anyway, on this LP they didn't use George Martin as much as a producer as they have done before. They were trying to do it by themselves, so this is like totally anarchy in the studio, but still so many great songs and so many like interesting recordings, and you know, as usual they pushed it. And just to release it in this like white cover, influenced by Yoko Ono with her like conceptual art and stuff. Yeah, I forgot to mention, but at this time, of course, John has started to hang out with Yoko Ono. During '68, Yoko Ono introduced heroin to John, and when he started to do heroin, he distanced himself from the band, and that eventually led to the breakup. And on the other hand, Paul McCartney had become this like dictator in the studio, wanting to put down drums instead of Ringo playing lead guitars instead of George. And I mean, they weren't working as a band. They did songs and they did it how they personally wanted it, not as a band. However, many people say that it isn't Yoko Ono's fault that they broke up, and I agree, it isn't. It has to do with Paul and John and their relationship. I mean, they were like a married couple up until '68. But when Paul met up with Linda, I think John got really jealous and wanted to really fast hook up with Yoko Ono. He just grabbed her and said that we are in love. He just wanted to show something to Paul. And the beef they had in the 70s, it started here. And I think it was something that happened in India. I'm really not sure what. But there are tons of books, podcasts, documentaries, blah, blah, blah. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you can totally do it. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit here, but this was the last LP I wanted to show from my Beatles collection. Maybe I'll do a video about the breakup year 1969, but that is for another video.
It doesn't matter much to me.
So now I have been talking about the Beatles for some time and show you my records from 1966 to 1968. And during those years they released many more like EPs and compilations like this Oldies and a couple of other albums that you don't need to have. All those like extra releases are totally unnecessary. If you have the albums that I have shown, you get the UK LPs and you get the UK singles that you need, and then you have a complete output from the Beatles 66 to 68. And that is all you need. And love, of course. That was how I collect the Beatles. How do you collect Beatles? Put it down in the comment, let me know. In my world, this is just what I need. I don't need to hunt for any more records by the Beatles. When I researched for this video a little bit, I checked Discogs for Rubber Soul, and I think it has over 900 entries of Rubber Soul. And I mean, you just need one, and that is the UK mono pressing. Or you can find like a reissue mono of it if you can find a cheaper one. But you don't need to go out and buy remastered Beatles stuff. Stay away from everything remastered. Go with the original masterings and the original pressings. That's the way to experience Beatles, in my opinion. So until next time, give peace a chance, buy some records, play some music, and be nice to each other. Peace out.